this crazy 31 days of culture that I somehow thought was a good idea in the middle of the night when I woke up. And I thought, let's just talk to 31 people in a month and go live and do it all. So, you know, so far it's been a lot of fun. I've been enjoying myself. We've been talking to some amazing people. I think yesterday was probably our most highly attended, which was pretty awesome to see, with thanks to Eric Severson from Neiman Marcus. That was great. But I'm going to turn it over here. We have Rhett Power on with us. We're going to talk about creating accountable cultures and everything else in between he might be thinking about. So, Rhett, why don't you introduce yourself? Let everyone know who you are. And you might notice this beautiful background. Apparently, he's hanging out in Cyprus today. So thanks for being on with me around the world.
Well, Chris, this is an amazing effort. Yeah, I don't know what inspired you to wake up and think about this, but it's got to be crazy hard. But I imagine you're having some amazing conversations. I've been able to catch a couple of them, and wow, great guests, great message. I'm Rhett Power. I run a company called Accountability Inc. I also write for Forbes and Rolling Stone and a few others, but my main work is twofold. It's executive coaching, and then we also we have an accountability management system that we help companies put in place that helps them create cultures. We're talking about culture. It helps them create cultures of high trust. It helps them create cultures of high engagement, high belief in the mission. And so that's our main work, and I'm excited to be here with you.
Well, that's awesome stuff. And we did this yesterday. We've kind of been trying to start off this way and make sure that we're defining what we're talking about so that everyone's on the same page, because it's pretty easy to have a different understanding about what is accountability. Is this creating a bunch of rules to make people follow stand in line and do what we ask them to do, or does this mean something else? So how would you define accountability, especially as it relates to culture in the workplace?
I was hoping you were going to ask that. Look, I mean, we talk about culture a lot, right? And we hear things about, well, in a good culture, you've got to have engagement. You've got to have a culture where people feel heard. You got to have a culture where people feel safe. Some people talk about having a fun culture, but you never hear the word in any of those typically that we want an accountable culture, because I think what we associate the word accountable with means it's usually fear-based, right? It means that we got in trouble for something, and our parents or our principal or our high school teacher said, well, you have to be accountable for your actions, right? And that's the word we usually associate it with something we did wrong. We got, in trouble when we were a kid. And going into adulthood, the word accountable meant that you did something wrong and that you have to take responsibility for it. And so we've associated it with fear, but I actually associated the word accountable with a word with I think it equals great culture. But that's not how most of us think about it. My position about accountability is this. I think it's a value. I think it's a value system that you hold within the organization, within the leadership, that says we're going to own this. We're going to believe in this. We're going to do everything we can to support our teams. We're going to go to bat for people. We're going to go to bat for clients, and that we're going to have ownership of what we're doing and what we're supposed to deliver. And I think so. To me, when you build an accountable culture, it's not a punitive thing. We're going to hold each other to a higher standard, right? We're going to push each other to be our best selves. To me, it's about maximizing human performance, right? And as leaders, I think that's one of our primary jobs is let's optimize people. Let's give them the tools. Let's give them the atmosphere, the surroundings so that they can thrive. And we often sort of leave all of that out. We focus on the product. We focus on these other things. We focus on building a truly accountable culture. And what I mean by that is everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. They understand. They have clear priorities, deliverables, and how they fit into the success of the company, right? Because it's amazing. You look at the Gallup research. Most people don't know where they fit into the organization. They don't know how. Most people don't know how their work is tied to the success of the company. Their managers don't know how and what their mission is and what their goals are. And so many of our people in our organizations are just kind of floating out there. And to me, I equate it to like putting a team on the field without practice and without a game plan. Why do professional athletes go onto the field with a game plan against their opponents? And they practice it all week. They talk about it. They watch the film. We're not doing that with our teams. If you look at what the research tells us. So what I mean by that is making sure everybody's on the same page, making sure that there's a game plan for the business that you're doing, and so that people know it. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And I really notice in cultures where we're building something, or there's sort of this high performance or maybe high pressure, or we're doing something. And often those are the cultures that people are attracted to. They feel like something is going on. There's a reason to be there. We're doing something special. But ultimately, if we don't hold people accountable, and there's a lot that goes into that, doing it in a healthy way. But if we don't, we expect product to go and to do this thing, or we expect, our programmers to get that thing done or fix that bug by this certain time. We have to hold those people accountable, that assuming nothing else happened that reasonably stopped them from doing it, they said they were going to do something. We need them to have done it, or else we can't do our job, right? And nothing is more frustrating as an employee if you're out there telling. I mean, this is a huge complaint. When I talk to like teams inside of companies, they'll be like, "I'm so tired of getting yelled at by the customer," right? I feel like my job is just to be the punching bag for the customer, right? And nothing ever gets done. And that's because often no one's holding the other parts of the organization accountable for the quality of the product or getting that bug fixed or whatever it is. And they just send their salespeople, their customer service people out into the world to get pummeled by rightfully upset customers, right? And so we need that a bit of accountability. So I love kind of what you were talking about, mentioning that people don't know where they fit in the organization. And I hate to bring this one up again. We've talked about this almost every day of the 17 days so far, is transparency, right? So that's one of my pillars in my book, is you've got to have a transparent culture. And so I don't want to beat that one up too much. We've been on it a lot, but if people got to know what they're supposed to do, they got to know what the organization expects of them, what's going on, and they got to have the information. But then the other pillar that I like to bring into here is measurement. And so maybe that's where we could talk a little bit more, is how do you measure what matters? How do you go after, and really in a healthy way for an organization, make sure we know what's going on, what's happening, and that we're meeting those goals or meeting those KPIs or whatever you want to call it, right, in a healthy way so the organization moves forward and our culture is great. I'll turn it back over to you.
No, this is great. I love this question about measurement, right? Because that's what it comes down to. And, first off, this is where this is the hard work of actually managing, right? I'm surprised at, number one, how many organizations don't have things like KPIs, right? Because if you don't, to me, that's a starting point. If people don't know what they're supposed to deliver, then the game is over. Really, you're going to get disrupted, right? If your teams are just floating out there with sort of arbitrary kind of goals, then you're not going to survive in this business climate that we're in today. Full stop. I believe you may get lucky for a little while, but at some point that's going to haunt you. And your teams do have deliverables and goals, and those are broken down into quarterly and maybe even monthly and yearly. Then your opportunity is, and the question is, how are you measuring, and how often are you measuring success and where you are? And then one of the system that we actually put out there, which is we call the accountability management system, you do this on a weekly basis, and it actually changes the way you hold meetings, because it's a visual spreadsheet really of everyone's deliverables in the organization, depending department, but it's done by department or by team, and everybody gets to see where everybody is against their deliverables and the progress that they're making on their key objectives. And so every meeting is a review of where you are on those KPIs and on those key objectives, on those key deliverables. And you've got to explain in that meeting where you are against those and how you are and the problems that you have. And you actually, this is where you talk about the hiccups, and this is where you talk about the bottlenecks. Sales isn't getting me what I need, or product development isn't getting me what I need. This is where you communicate your successes, but it's also where you communicate your challenges to the team and to your leadership. So to me, it's a weekly process where you manage your success against where you're supposed to be. And so it's real-time data on where you're supposed to be. It's real-time understanding of the challenges and the successes so that you can duplicate those. What the other effect that I've seen this have, which I think is amazing, is it uses positive peer pressure because you're seeing everybody's success, and it's no secret how your teammates are doing. Everybody's in there, everybody's talking about, and their results are visible. So you see how they're doing. There's a little bit of positive peer pressure on performance, right? It pushes everybody to perform more or better and more efficiently because they can see how their teams are doing and how their teammates are doing. It gives the manager real-time access and knowledge of where things are, what the challenges are. So you're not going to be surprised by a bottleneck or a problem. And it lets management sort of deal with some of those cross department, those other managers that they need to talk to get a problem solved. So to me, it's a weekly thing. You have a visual representation of how you're doing every week. And people, we do it by red, green, or yellow. Red, you've got some problems, you're not making any progress. Yellow, you're making some progress. And green, you're good to go. And this is what you've done this week to get a green. So to me, we measure it I measure success every week in this system. And I know where we are, I know where I am, I know where my teams are. And that's valuable for leadership and management. It's valuable for the team member. It's valuable for everybody. And it sparks healthy competition. It also takes out favorites. One of the things I love about a system like this is it takes the favorites out of the system. I don't know about you, but I've worked in organizations where I wasn't the favorite and somebody else was, and they got the good accounts and they got the good, the bonuses. And it wasn't based on merit. It wasn't based on my performance. It was based on the manager liked that person.
Right.
Right. And so we'd scratch our heads and say, what can we do to get that kind of account? We're meeting and exceeding our numbers, but this guy, he's just sitting on the couch waiting for leads because he's just they're getting fed to him. So it takes that kind of nonsense out of stuff too.
So what's interesting is it's often up to our senior leaders to create that system and create the right kind of accountability. And yet I see that it is our senior leaders who completely screw it up and cause chaos when they have something that they just want to do that doesn't follow the rules. And I remember years ago when I went to get my Scrum Master certification, and they said, if you can also get your product owner, which was sort of two sides of the house. There's the getting stuff done, and then there's the, watching the list of things that need to be done and curating that list, right? And they said, if you're ever a product owner, your number one rule is you never, ever let the CEO come in and put a project inside of anything else, because you've promised everyone all these things and you have this order and you've done all these things to make sure it's going to go, everything's going to go. And then they'll come in and go, oh, no. My buddy Bob needs this thing done by tomorrow and you programmers are going to do it. And so they said, if you don't have this agreement with your CEO that's not how this works here, then don't do it, quit, go find another job, because your life will be hell forever. And I remember laughing out loud when I heard that. I was just like, that is so true, right? It's just like, so how do we deal with that, or can we deal with that, right? If we've got senior leaders that are going to pick favorites or come in and pull resources out of things, it's pretty hard for things to be really accountable, right?
Look, I was a CEO, and I was probably the worst CEO in that sense until I matured. But I've got the worst case of ADD in the world. I love bright, shiny objects, right? And what this system or a system like this can give you is exactly what you're talking about. It's almost a contract between you and the teams that you work with. And my teams would say, okay, you have this new bright, shiny object. Okay, here are things that we have committed to and planned for and been working towards. What is more important? Because we can't do everything. What on this list now is going to be sacrificed? Bright, shiny object that you want to do, right? And it doesn't. I mean, to me, it actually gives the teams like this. This is the kind of thing that gives us license to say, time out. This is not what we had planned for. I think it can help put the brakes on those distractions and those things that often derail us. Because this is in essence a contract, that you give to your teams, and it gives them a focus, and it actually helps you work and say, okay, this is a bright shiny object. We don't need it. We don't need to do it. We don't need to focus on that. This doesn't move the needle forward. This doesn't move us forward. Now it doesn't say that there aren't sometimes where you have to pivot quickly, 100%. And that's a different question and a different strategy and a different thing. But I would often say, I would derail my teams all the time when I was a young CEO and say, hey, would you go make me a mock-up of this box real quick, right? And I would derail their whole day trying to get them to fix something or to put something together that I needed, because I wasn't planning very well. I wasn't anticipating very well. And so I would come in and I would ask them to do something that would completely derail their core work, right? And it probably was very frustrating. In fact, I know it was. And until I used a system like this, we learned that a system like this was essential to keep me focused as well, not only my team, but keeping me focused, right? And asking the right questions, like, is this really important? Is this going to move us anywhere? Is this going to move us in a direction we need to go? Is this going to help us secure that client? If I'm not asking myself the key questions with these little side projects and these little side distractions, this forces those questions to be asked.
Yeah. And for anybody who maybe is saying, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I deal with every day. My manager or my boss or somebody comes in and has these little shiny objects. And, it's always this balance between, hey, we want to try something new. We want to be innovative. Maybe we could try this thing and it's going to save us so much time, or it's going to create a better result for our customer. And we want to try it. So the way in which I learned to kind of deal with this is that we put a certain amount of hours into the bank each month for a shiny object. We used to call them, Chris's things or whatever, shiny object project. And so if you know that, hey, we've got so many hours every month, and you're going to reserve 10 hours or 5 hours a month for that stuff, then you've built in, you've planned for it. And we know it's going to happen. And if it's not used that month, then we can get caught up on other things. But that's a better and a healthier way to handle and be able to still be fun and innovative and deal with stuff we didn't plan for, and not be just stuck in, well, this is all we do. We made this plan 3 years ago. We're going to see it through kind of thinking, right? We don't want that either. IBM might disagree with you on that, but we don't want that kind of thing. But yeah, go ahead.
Opportunistic, right? You've got to build in. I love the idea of putting a bank, put banking some time, right? To be opportunistic when there's an opportunity that does present itself. And I think, to me, it's the major the major disruptions that sometimes causes. It's like the big questions, the big shifts that it prevented me from going off on this whim, right? Or this whole new course that was business changing. Not, if we're doing something to get a client, we're creating something to show a client, that's within the scope of what we do, right? And those things do come up urgently, right? So I don't think it prevents some of the urgent client work that you do, or the client product development stuff that you do, because that's, to me, part of just growing and being flexible. But it's to prevent, I think, the big stuff.
Yeah. Now we talked about people having their favorites, and maybe we can kind of take a little tangent there. I think probably where I step into that when I've worked with leaders is to try to make sure that they're aware of this cognitive bias called the halo effect, which is a two-parter. One, somebody has done a great job for you in the past. They were your top performer. They came in, they killed it. They took care of the client, the project, whatever. And suddenly now as the leader, we're like, well, every important, every big, every, intense thing is going to go to that person because I can trust them and I know they're going to do a good job. It's not that I don't like everybody else, even though that's probably how it feels to them. It's that person has proven to me that they can do this stellar job and I can trust them to make me look good and the client to look good and all of that. And the second part of the halo effect is that they might choose people because they are good looking, they dress nice, right? Their appearance is nice. And so they assume, well, they must be successful or they must be good or they're going to be better to put in front of the client, all that stuff. So how do we counter some of that? And is there more to it than what I've sort of described as it relates to favoritism?
I mean, I think that's hard because we all have biases, right? We all have that, and often I don't think it's even things that we realize about ourselves, right? So much. So to me, what this does, a good system of accountability, it just shows in real time who's actually performing, who's working hard every week, who's doing the right activity every week to deserve a chance at some of those opportunities. Is it going to stop? Is it going to stop bias from happening? Absolutely not. But what it does do is it gives, because of that transparency we talked about, it gives everybody an even playing field when those decisions about an account or an opportunity arises. And it gives you ammunition as a salesperson or a team member to go to your boss and say, hey, look, I've been outperforming my numbers time and time again. I'd like a shot at this. Right. And it just gives you that ammunition to be able to speak up and say, I deserve a chance at that kind of opportunity. And it also gives people, to me, it also gives a roadmap for what is that person that's getting all those things? What are they doing that I can duplicate so that I can have that same opportunity, right? And maybe it's stress, maybe it's other things, but a lot of times it's also, they are top performers. And what's the activity that they're doing every day? If they're going out and they're seeing 5 more customers than everybody else a day, they're gonna obviously have better sales. So it gives you an idea too what they're doing to get those opportunities. Does it take the bias and the favoritism? No, it doesn't stop that. It also puts that on notice, I would say.
Well, I love that you've introduced us to the next pillar, which is positivity, right? We're focusing on what's working. And if a leader can say, why is that person doing such a good job? If they can get curious about that, instead of just saying, well, they do a great job, I'm going to give them all those kinds of projects. Get curious about what they're doing, right? So that we can teach everybody else. We can share that knowledge. We can make sure everyone can be fantastic at it. And the other thing that I have always found to, at least in projects where I'm involved, I really don't like to just give one person the work. I feel like when we send people off to go work in silos, when we just say, here, person, this is your thing, that's when they get burnt out. That's when they get overwhelmed. That's when they feel like they're underwater. So I like to put people in teams. So if there's a certain kind of client that you would give to somebody, can we give it to a team of people so they can support each other, they can learn from each other, and eventually one of those people might step up and be your next top performer for something else, right? So if you find that you're sort of stuck in this, well, I want to give this thing to this person, can you give it to a group? Can you give it to a team, right? And let them go and learn and manage and I've always seen that sort of like, I don't know, splinter off, right? One person learns and they splinter off, they become top performer, then they teach some more people and they become a top performer, right? Next thing you know, you're I mean, my customer service team in my last company, when we started looking at ratings, we were getting like on the what do they call it? NPS score of like 35, which for a car dealership is fantastic, right? But in our industry, we were like, we ended up getting it up to like in the 90s. Now it took us 2 years, but we worked and worked and worked, and we as a team, and they learned, and they just eventually got up to one of the top scores I've ever seen. But I didn't do that by handing it to one person and saying, go do it, right? Go fix it on your own, right?
No, 100%. I love that idea. I mean, I think when you take that approach, it just, a friend of mine talks about, he uses the word believership, Ryan Berman, who's head of Courageous. And I love that word believership, because what you did in that company and in that team is you create a whole team of believers by taking that approach, right? And what do you get when you have a team of believers? Like, that's where you get championship level performance, right? If you look at championship sports teams, there's an intangible thing that they have in that locker room, and that is they all believe in one another, right? And they all push each other to a high degree. And I think that's what you're talking about in doing that. Again, and it takes time to build that. It's not an easy overnight thing, but I bet you had trust. I bet you had engagement. I bet you had people that weren't afraid to share their thoughts and their views. I mean, I think you had a bunch of people in there that were pulling for each other, and it was a watch your back culture, not a got your back culture.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that saying. We've used it a few times. It's yeah. Do you want to have a culture where people have your back, or are people where they have to watch your back? I mean, that's pretty important differentiation on what your experience is like and how it feels to be inside of your culture. Now, you mentioned Ryan Berman. He's going to be on Friday at 10 a.m. If anybody's interested, he's part of the 31 days, of course. And hopefully people will, I'm sorry, say it again.
Oh, one of his lines, I think.
That's good. That's good. We'll let them know. So I think we're almost out of time here, and I know you're out in beautiful Cyprus and probably time to go find a nice place to have dinner. But is there anything that you might leave us with? Is there something we left out of this conversation that we should be thinking about around accountability, or maybe just culture in general, that you think is important right now?
I think there are a couple things, like a couple things that we're seeing that have real team implications and real team success lately in our work. We've got companies now that are trying accountability partners within the organization. And that is really helping people and teams. And we've got teams now that are within the management team, within the C-suite, within the organizational structure, the management are pairing up, and they're pushing each other on accountability goals to talk about where they are and what their challenges are, and they're pushing each other really hard to do better, stay focused. So you might want to try some accountability partners in your org. That is really, we're seeing a lot of people with success for that. We can also create small team accountability groups where you track success and you're tracking progress on goals. And some companies are taking it even further, where they're adding in personal goals, not just work goals, but hey, people are adding in their health goals and their wellness goals and things in their personal lives that they want to improve on, and they're getting their colleagues and their friends at work and their allies at work to push them harder to even be better. We know that a healthy employee, somebody that gets enough sleep and rest and has work-life harmony, a little bit of harmony in their lives, is a better performer, right? We know that. And so we're seeing in their organization are having a lot of success with that. So I'd leave you with that, something tangible for your company to try. They can always look up what we're doing and reach out to us for advice on that. And we're happy to help them sort of set that up with their organization. But that's just something to leave you with.
Well, fantastic. I really appreciate you being on with me today. As always, I always learn a lot in talking to you. Hopefully people learn some things as well, and love to get your further comments. October 31st, my book comes out on Amazon in the United States. If you're anywhere else in the world, you should be able to get it right now, but please check it out. And we'll be back tomorrow with another great person. I think we're on with Kim Shepard around noon Pacific Standard Time, talking about remote company culture, how to make a remote team work. So, Rhett, I really appreciate you being with me today, buddy, and be safe. And we'll hopefully talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.